Hello and welcome back to the James Kennedy podcast. How you doing? I missed you. I wasn't here last week. I took a week off. Did you notice? Did anyone care? I doubt it very much. But, I've been trying to be really good with these podcasts, like getting one out every week. And I've just been so crazy busy with other stuff, man, that I just wasn't able to get one out last week. So apologies for that. But I'm sure the world kept doing its thing despite my absence. So what the hell have I been doing with my time, I hear you scream? Well, check this out. Just 2 days ago, your man here was sat inside the walls of the House of Lords, giving evidence on behalf of the incredible Carry On Touring campaign about the difficulties facing UK creative industries wanting to tour in Europe post-Brexit. There was a bunch of us there. There was myself. There was Perry, the guitar player from Pendulum. There was the Musicians Union. There was, of course, Tim and Ian, the amazing people behind the Carry On Touring campaign. Tim Brennan, of course, was on the podcast just a few episodes back. He was the guy that spearheaded this whole thing with the incredible petition that he set up, which garnered over 280,000 votes, signatures, I should say, and got it debated in Parliament. And now, I was part of the entourage that went down there to give first-hand or second-hand evidence to the Lords and the MPs about the true realities of what it is like for touring parties and their crews to try and do their thing in Europe post-Brexit. So that was interesting. We had to go in through like an airport type of thing, where you go through a metal detector and you got to put your all your wallet and all your bits in a tray, and then they scan that through and then you go in. So there was about 30 of us. We're all dressed in leather with big beards and long hair, and we're just like jamming up the entire entrance to the House of Lords. And you got all these guys in suits trying to squeeze past, and the looks we were getting, they were just like, who the fuck are these guys coming into the House of Lords? But it was cool, man. It went well, I think, and like for the campaign to get it that far is a huge achievement on their behalf as well. So I was happy to play, whatever small supporting role I could in the thing. I got to give my 10 cents, where I kind of fed back, the issues affecting my industry as a musician with regards to touring in Europe post-Brexit. And it was fucking hilarious because I said that, many of the bands that I know of are just straight out cancelling their tours. And then I went on to elaborate, about the issues surrounding the Carne, the ridiculousness of the Carne situation, which has been discussed on the podcast before. The 90-day rule, where crew members have got to come back after 3 months before they can, and they have to be home for another 3 months before they can go back out, which obviously is, terminal for their career as a full-time professional crew member, trying to do their thing in Europe. So I was talking about all that. And then I mentioned, the awesome and beloved Eddie Marsh, the bass player from the James Kennedy and the Underdogs extravaganza, who is, as some of you may know, part of the Iron Maiden touring party. And I spoke to Ed a few weeks ago, and he said that they'd had a bit of a nightmare on their European leg as well. So I talked about that as an example of how this affects all levels of the food chain. And Perry from Pendulum chimed in with a comment about, Bruce Dickinson from Maiden being such a strident supporter of Brexit that now it's interesting that he's getting his comeuppance, And the Lord, I was sat like right at the head of the table, man. It was really fucking freaky. So I was sat pretty much right next to the main Lord that was hosting the thing, and he was scribbling everything down in shorthand. And I was fascinated by this because it just looked like a mess on the page. But he didn't miss a trick, this dude, man. He was scribbling everything down because about an hour after Perry's comment, when the conversation had gone elsewhere, he just randomly said, well, I'd like to get this Bruce Dickinson chap in for a chat to see what he's got to say for himself. I was like, fucking hell, he wrote that down and remembered it. He clearly got no clue who Bruce Dickinson is. And the idea of Bruce Dickinson from Maiden getting reprimanded by a bunch of 80-year-old lords, it was just fucking hilarious. But I thought they were quite cool, man, to be honest. They all seemed quite clued up on the issues. They all spoke quite passionate. I'm talking about the Lords now, they all talk quite passionately and quite knowledgeably about the issues affecting the industries, which was quite hopeful. Interesting to note, though, that there wasn't a single Tory MP or Lord in the room at all, in the audience. And given that they are, the government, that I think is going to be a bit of a roadblock to progress on this issue. But at the same time, they were swearing in their new dictator on Tuesday, weren't they? The lovely, I'm sure, Liz Truss, who is going to solve all of our energy problems within the next 5 days or something like that. So that's awesome. But it was an interesting experience, man. It's just one of the many bizarre and random and interesting things that you get to do when you're a musician, So I just say yes to shit and turn up and see what happens. And it was fun. I met some cool people, and it was you could tell we were all musicians because the second the thing wrapped up, we all just whipped out our phones and started taking selfies. Like, there's no way I'm missing the opportunity to get a picture of myself sat in a House of Lords. Fuck that. So we're all like, hey man, can you take a picture of me? Yeah man, can you take a picture of me? And it was like back in our natural habitat of taking selfies. And then the conversation immediately moved to where we all going to go for a pint, But, in all seriousness, I think we did a service for the campaign. It's a lot further down the line now, hopefully, now that it's actually got some traction inside Parliament. I mean, I know these things take a long time and politics is messy and full of compromise and, but I know there are much bigger issues, I suppose, more broadly speaking. But Kevin Brennan, the main man was there, who was also on the podcast a couple of episodes back. He's a major driving force in this. So big up to Kevin Brennan on behalf of all the musical community and all the crew members that were affected by this issue, because he is, he is very eloquent, passionate, and articulate, and very energetic, and he is really driving this hard from within inside Parliament. So Kevin, if you're listening, we thank you for that, man. Right, but today, I know that most of you who've clicked on the link to listen to this have clicked on it for one reason and one reason only. You've clicked on it because you want to hear the mighty, the awesome, the brilliant, the talented, and the lovely Mr. Frank Turner. Frank's coming. Hold your horses. He'll be here in just a bit, but I mean, he's a busy dude. He's got to wrap up his previous interview and then he's going to squeeze us in before he's going to move straight on to another one. Now, for those of you that are hoping to hear about when Frank first discovered his love of music and what was the first record he ever heard and all that sort of stuff, I won't be asking him any of those questions. Sorry. My podcast is not a promo platform, and Frank doesn't need that anyway, so I'm hoping to have a bit more of an interesting conversation with Frank and try and give him some questions that he hasn't already answered a million times before, which would be difficult because, he's done a lot. But I purposely don't get a lot of musicians on the podcast because, no disrespect to the community that I'm a part of. Many of them, they live quite a one-dimensional life, and I get that. It's all about the rock and roll and the music and not much else. But, I'm more interested in talking to people that have got something we can either learn from or that can, highlight a cause or a campaign, or just people who are dead interesting and insightful about life or their stories or whatever. And Frank, I think, navigates quite a lot of that stuff. He's a very interesting guy who's done a hell of a lot, achieved a hell of a lot. He's experienced a lot of highs, a lot of lows. He's had a very interesting journey as a person and as an artist. And, thankfully as well, he's also very articulate, well-spoken, and very outspoken. So I thought Frank would be a perfect person. If we're going to get somebody from the music world to come on, I thought he would be somebody who could be much more interesting than someone who just come on and try and plug their latest record, But by the way, Frank's latest does have a new record. The number one in the album charts. Incredibly awesome FTHC, which I'm a massive fan of. So I'll try not to fanboy over that aspect of it too much. But that's not the main reason why Frank is on today. I just thought Frank would be an interesting guest, and hopefully we can have a chat that for you Frank Turner fans out there listening will be something different, to see a different side of Frank. So I'm just looking at the clock here, and Frank is due to join us any second now, so stay right where you are. And in the meantime, I'm going to nag you again. Have you subscribed to the podcast? It's a click of a button, man. Come on, help a brother out here. Have you subscribed to the podcast? If you haven't, what better reason and what better time to do it than to do it now? So get on it. Smash that star ratings button. Give me some stars, man. Come on, is that too much to ask? And of course, please do spread the word about the podcast. We're getting interesting dudes on every week, and we'll continue to do so as long as there's interest in us doing that. So help us get this word out there and help support the podcast and, help keep us afloat so that we can keep giving you the good stuff. And now, the moment you've been waiting for. Frank Turner is a man who needs no introduction and is one of the hardest working people in the business and one of the finest songwriters and lyricists of our time. He's only just recently gotten back from completing a gargantuan tour of the US, 50 states in 50 days, and his latest album, the awesome FTHC, recently peaked at number 1 on the UK album chart. We've got a lot to get into and not a lot of time to do it, so without further ado, Mr. Frank Turner, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. What a lovely intro. That made me feel accomplished.
Well, accomplished you are, number 1. How does that feel, man, having number 1 record?
Yeah, it's good. It's a slightly mixed feeling for me, simply because as a kid, my whole sort of identity was that I was the kind of kid who didn't care about the charts, what was in the charts.
Same.
And then as an adult to then sort of get the number 1 in the charts, the point is it's awesome. But there's a little 16-year-old me in the middle wagging her finger somewhere.
You sold out.
Yeah, no, but the thing is, ultimately, that guy was an idiot. So let's just move on. It feels great.
100%. And dude, what a record as well. I'll be plugging the shit out of the record later on, but it's one of my favorites. Honestly, I love it. To what an achievement.
Thank you. That's very kind.
But you are a busy mofo, as I just said in the intro. I mean, you've just gone back from 50 states in 50 days. You've been a busy mofo for a long time. You're an unstoppable force. I mean, what for me, I'm interested in what's driving that. I mean, I couldn't keep up, man. I don't know how the hell you've been able to do this for so long, so consistently at such a high quality, constantly on the move with such a high level of creative output. What's driving this? Is it pure creative passion and endeavor, or is it something else, do you think?
I mean, I mean, first of all, it's a slightly difficult question for me to answer because I'm sat in the middle of this Tasmanian devil tornado. But like, I kind of. I grew up idolizing bands like Black Flag, and there was very much a kind of there's an interesting and unpackable crossover between the Puritan work ethic and hardcore punk, I think. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But the idea of touring a lot and touring hard and all that kind of thing was always really appealing to me. And I've sort of, in a way that's unoriginal, but I've always been slightly haunted by mortality in a sense of like limited time and this kind of thing. And It's like, get on with it. I can no longer be an archaeologist and a paleontologist and an astronaut and do you know what I mean? My options limit, so I picked this one, do it well. But I mean, ultimately, I suspect that like it's just like I've got two sisters and they're both equally driven in their fields. Right. One of my sisters is in the Green Party, one of them's in the army. Do you know what I mean? And like, I think my mum slightly wonders what it was she was kind of drinking, if you know what I mean. So, I mean, there's definitely like that we have quite a sort of, we're quite a kind of, driven family, should we say. Okay,
so there's nothing more sinister driving this, you don't think? It doesn't seem like that when I look at you. It seems like this is just something
I don't think so.
This is just in your blood, like I'm getting, and it sounds as if it's in the family.
I think it is, yeah. I mean, I can psychoanalyze to a degree, and like, I was pretty angry about quite a lot of my childhood and my education and that kind of thing. And there's a certain degree, I think like most people involved in punk rock, there's a little kind of burning coal of fury.
Yes.
Somewhere in the middle of this chest. But like, I mean, yeah, it's difficult for me to answer the question, but
100%.
Yeah, hopefully it's a constructive drive rather than a destructive one.
It was certainly constructive for us because it gives us all this great music. So even if there is something painful within you triggering it, then it's to our benefit. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Do you even manage to have a work-life balance at this point? How do you manage to straddle that?
That's the thing actually that I've consciously worked on for the last few years. And it's funny because like pandemic aside, was actually in the middle of just easing off the gas a little bit. And in a way that perhaps not everybody has noticed because we're quite good at sort of spreading things out and announcing enormous tour dates in one go. Right. And therefore people miss the gaps. But like, we used to do 250 plus shows a year. It's not that intense anymore. And, I got married. I have a home life. I have a cat.
Oh, nice.
Lots of people in my band and crew have kids now, and ultimately I do want to do this for the rest of my life. And I'm sort of old enough now to understand that it's a marathon and not a sprint.
Right.
And, I turned 40 and believe me, there are things you can do when you're in your 20s that you can't do in your 40s.
Yeah.
Just physically. There's definitely been a sense of trying to sort of be realistic about that. Also, there was a moment in my life when I was kind of engaged in an arms race with myself to be the hardest touring SOB in the world, kind of thing, and I sort of realized after a while that first of all nobody else was taking part in this race, and secondly, like no one else really cared, and it was quite destructive for my own kind of mental health, and indeed it makes you quite sort of one-dimensional as a person if you only do one thing all the time, and like. I'm lucky that I started this idea of trying to build a kind of a hinterland for myself outside of touring before the pandemic hit, because then it meant that I didn't completely go off the deep end once my job got made illegal, for 18 months. It's I've been very fortunate in that. There's definitely been a sense of trying to sort of like do things in a slightly more controlled fashion going forward.
I think that's one of the hardest things to achieve in our line of work. So it's amazing that you've managed to do that, because I was speaking to the lovely Ian Winwood when he was on the podcast a couple of months ago about his amazing book Bodies, which I'm sure you've read as well, where he talks about all of the negative negative sides of this business and the hole that you can, well, there's many holes that you can fall down to in this business.
Sure.
And I actually met him about a month or so ago in London for a bit of food, and we were chatting, and I said, yes, so, who, if you were to name an artist that you think has got it about right then, that manages to avoid the trappings of the music monster while still managing to be creatively authentic and active and successful as well, who would you say is managing to pull that off? And he said you. So, I mean, what's the secret then?
That's very kind of him. The first thing to say is that I spent a fair amount of time jumping gleefully into some of those holes. And indeed, I think Ian wouldn't mind me saying this, it's at times with Ian. Our friendship is in many ways based on the fact that we both came through certain kind of addictive issues at a similar time. I think that he had a more difficult time than I did, but regardless. I think at this point, it's partly through the fact I just occupy a weird place in the music industry. When I started out with my solo career, it was kind of interesting because there were quite a few people who I was sort of playing kind of Nambuka and squat gigs at this bar I used to hang out at, who got signed to enormous labels and had the stratospheric kind of spaceship taking off kind of start of a career, and I totally didn't. I put out my first record and played to 200 people and sort of went hooray, and essentially a lot of my friends' careers just went bang right at the beginning, and a fair few of them then have crashed back to us, as often happens in the music industry. Some of them, JBT is still riding high, and so he should, because he's one of the greatest songwriters in the country, in my opinion. But my ascent, such as it was much slower, and I kind of crested on like album 5. Do you know what I mean? Right. Rather than album 1, and that's unusual. And there were times when I was pretty frustrated about this. In retrospect, I'm pretty glad about it, because I think that it meant that I sort of managed to build a sort of longer lasting structure for what I do.
Yeah.
In terms of fan base and in terms of my own kind of regard for it, it was harder for me to be quite so swept off my feet by the trappings of success, given that it took me a long bloody time to get. And you're just slightly more realistic about it. I was slightly older when I did get to the point of headlining an arena. I wasn't 23, I was 31. And there was a difference there. And so all of this just sort of meant that I was able to kind of be slightly more arm's length about the industry generally, and when it comes to America, like an awful lot of British bands go to America and they play Chicago and New York and LA, and then they come home and they go, well, we didn't crack America, and it's like, and I got in a van and played every state round and round and round and again and again and again for 15 years.
Wow.
And now I have a career in America, but it's like, but that goes back to the thing about growing up listening to Black Flag. That's all I ever wanted to do when I was a kid, was get in a van and drive around America. But I don't have the traditional music industry career, and I never really did. And it means that there's a more kind of sense of stability in what I do, hopefully more a sense of realism. And now at a point, 9 albums in, there's no cliches around where I stand. Do you know what I mean? There's no cliche about the difficult 9th album. If you get to make a 9th album and people are still interested and you're still selling records and tickets and all the rest of it, you're kind of home free, because what criticism is someone going to level at me? I mean, people can say, I don't like what you do. That's totally fine. Of course, whatever. But they can't say it's completely without merit or without value, because it self-evidently isn't. It can't be at this point. And there's a sort of security in that which enables you to be kind of free in a funny way.
And you've got an incredible fan base as well. Your audience, man, it borders on worship, and rightfully so, because I mean, you've spoken throughout your amazing back catalogue now, throughout your songs, you've spoken honestly about so many different parts of the human condition that so many different people can relate to. And I meet people all the time. You just come up in conversation, you start talking about music, and people are like, oh, I've got a Frank Turner tattoo, and it's like, and they're fucking, that you've got an amazing loyal fan base. Sure. And I think that's testament to, like you say, you've built that up from doing it in a van, playing to 12 people, to 200 people, to 2,000 people, and you've just been consistently playing and just getting out there and doing your thing authentically, and you've built that up so it's not that overnight promo extravaganza situation,
Yeah, totally. I mean, it also helped. I've sort of long had a philosophical issue with the idea of kind of almost like class stratification in music. Like, the thing that appealed to me about punk rock was the idea that performers and audience come from the same pool. Like, we are a community having conversation. But it's like the idea that musicians are a separate caste to punters is just sort of idiotic to me. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. And obviously, in my early shows, I sold my own merch. I just hang out after the show, all the rest of it. You can't do that when you're playing Wembley Arena. It's just it's idiotic. It's not possible. Yeah. But there is a sort of, from an awful lot of people who are into my music, it has been a philosophical gesture there in the early days, which hopefully establishes all that. And also, just little things like my email address is still on my website, so people can say hi.
Well, I emailed you and you got back personally. I was like, oh, that doesn't happen often,
Yeah, well, but who else does that? Henry Rollins, and still does, I might add. So
I can confirm that he does.
Yeah, so there's an obvious kind of lineage there.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned punk because if I look at your back catalogue, there's a lot of different genres there. I mean, the new album's got some heavy shit on there. It's great to see that coming back, and obviously, A Million Dead as well was a very heavy band. Sure. But I think if I look through some of the more popular records and the more acoustic folk tinge stuff, I still feel the punk aesthetic there. I think that's the through line. I can just feel that through everything you do. Yeah. And it's interesting because for me, I don't think punk is about a genre. I think punk is about an ethos. And I'd be interested to know what punk is to you. Do you see it that way?
I do. I should preface this by saying that if humanity collectively could take all the time that people have spent arguing about what punk is and isn't and direct it towards something like curing cancer, that would be a better use of everybody's time.
100%.
Because ultimately, who cares?
Right.
What punk is or isn't. And my wife, who is a proper old school folkie and didn't really have any interaction with punk rock until we met, regards this whole debate with a detached sort of perplexity. She's just it's
who cares?
Just boys. It's just boys arguing. And she's 100% right about that. So with that bit of throat clearing out of the way, punk was hugely important to me as a kid because I felt very, very alienated when I was growing up and kind of pissed off and like I didn't fit and all this kind of thing. And then I discovered, the rage of the Pistols and Black Flag was great. The inclusivity of the Clash was arguably more important.
Yes.
And I started kind of bunking the train and going to London and discovered that there was it wasn't just stuff that happened in 78 or 81 or whatever. There was an active underground hardcore punk scene in London based around Household Name Records, the FTHC scene in the late 90s. And the barrier to entry was showing up.
Yes.
Partly because there were so few people who were interested, but also because the whole point was it was inclusive. And this is a slightly not the right time period, but it was a safe space almost. Yes. I mean, it was just kind of like, if you can find this place and you love it and you want to be part of it, then you're in. That's it, done. And that was so important to me as a kid because I felt like I didn't fit with my school. I felt like I didn't fit with my family and all the rest of it.
That was your home.
It was like, these are my people. And it was the first kind of sense of welcome and community I ever really had. And over the years, my relationship with punk has changed enormously and it's gone up and down, and there's certain people from the underground scene who loathe me because I've been successful or whatever it might be, but right in the middle of it there is still that sense that it's my safe space kind of thing, and I will defend that until my dying breath. Having said all that, the other thing that I do think though is that if I'm having a conversation with people who are quote unquote punks, then I am very critical of punk as a concept, but if I'm having a conversation with people who aren't, then I'm incredibly defensive of it because, do you know what I mean? It's like, it's mine. Shut up. Leave it alone.
Well, I love your missus's response to that. And I think that's the one that I'm going to parrot now when people start talking to me about it as well. I'm just going to say, ultimately, who cares?
Yeah. Totally.
But, well, you mentioned that you've recently turned 40 and you've had an amazing career now for a long time as well. You've started right at the bottom. You've had amazing success, but I know that you've had a lot of struggles and stuff like that personally, as well as through the journey of, the arts and everything. I'm interested to know at this point in your life, I don't want to get too heavy at this early hour in the morning, are you aware of how this has changed you at all? Have you got any kind of midlife revelatory life lessons that you're particularly unique? Because you've had a unique journey that most people don't get to experience. Most people don't get to travel the world and stuff,
Yeah, that all of that side of things is true, of course, and I've been very privileged to travel and play music for a living. It's like I do it for free, don't tell anyone. So there's that side of things. I mean, obviously, in terms of having kind of issues and struggle, I think that's a pretty common human experience. I don't think that my journey's been any more dramatic than anybody else's on that level. Sugar. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just getting a coffee delivered by my bandmate.
Gotta be done.
Nice. Yeah. Good work, Matthew. You're hired for another week.
I'll take one as well, please, Matt.
Yeah, he wants one too, Matt. Yeah. Anyway. But so, I mean, I'm very hesitant to talk about lessons and all the rest of it, and accrued wisdom and all this kind of thing, because I still kind of like step on rakes pretty regularly. Do you know what I mean? Just in all possible readings of that statement. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I can stand here and say things like, looking back over my career to date, that there have been the only regrets that I have, and incidentally, the whole like I've got no regrets thing is just like, well, then you aren't examining your life particularly.
Right.
Of course, I've got some regrets. Everybody does. My regrets tend to be those, thankfully, very few moments when I haven't kind of trusted my gut instinct about my art,
100%.
kind of thing. And you know, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on this, but there's a couple of music videos that I'm just like about, to pick an example, and like, you know, so it's a long lesson. It is the cliche that everybody tells you when you start out, but speaking now 25 years into a music career, it's true. Trust your gut. Do the things that you believe in,
right?
Because ultimately you will have to answer for your creative decisions for the rest of your life, you know. So that's one thing I would say I was learned. And I guess the second thing I would say is that, like, and I wrote an entire record about this, so forgive me for quoting myself, but like, ultimately I feel like over time people forget the content of your conversations and remember the tone of them more. And I think that being kind and considerate and kind and considerate with your interactions with other people and gentle, even if you disagree with them and all this kind of thing, is really important to me. I should hasten to add at this point that I'm aware that there's a degree of privilege in putting it that way, in the sense that there are people who are in situations where kindness and gentleness in their disagreements is a ludicrous idea. And of course that's true. And I'm not trying to, this is why I'm hesitate to answer your question, is that I'm very reticent to tell anybody else what to do. But for myself, like, I just think that, like, the older I get, the more I think back to the things that trouble me are the times when I've been brittle and harsh and unforgiving and all these kinds of things. And I think that if I could change anything, I would go back and make myself more kind, basically.
Love it.
And like, as I say, that's not going to apply to everybody in all situations. I don't think that, you know, you should be kind to fascists or whatever, to pick a clunkingly obvious example. But so, you know, there are obvious kind of, different gradations to this, but on my personal level, on my journey through life, I sort of, even the people that I have fallen out with and disagreed with, I could have been more considerate. And
that's your philosophy. I love it. Yeah. Well, I think your reticence to answer that actually speaks volumes, because I think you're right in that. So I appreciate you sharing that. How do you feel about the music industry? You've seen the transition from the old model to the new. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's a funny thing that you say that, because actually for my engagement with kind of like the above ground music industry, if you like, sort of began almost exactly at the point when everything started falling down and everyone started running around screaming with their hair on fire. So like, I sort of know about and grew up as a consumer of the music industry before the internet and before everything went nuts, but I never worked in that industry. Do you know what I mean? And so to a degree, I'm quite comfortable with the fact that the music industry is generally in some kind of panicky death spiral forever, and that everyone thinks it's going to collapse next week, and it's been like that the whole time we've been involved in it. I always think in these conversations it's crucial to say that music industry is two separate words, and that I'm interested in the music and I necessarily engage in the business or the industry side of it. But ultimately, if I get to make a living expressing myself, and indeed my band and my crew get to make a living being part of that, then happy days. And quite the mechanics of the economics behind that. Obviously, there's something I have to pay attention to, but I'm not that fussed
Secondary.
In some ways. Exactly. Secondary. Having said everything I've just said, I mean, I do think that there's an inflection point in the structure of the industry is imminent. I think that at the moment, the music industry is very, very obsessed with data, and particularly you look at things like TikTok, which incidentally has the death harbinger of civilization and culture as a concept. Anyway, but Have you been on TikTok?
Of course, dude. I'm as addicted to monkey videos as anybody else, mate. Come on, I'm human.
But I mean, I got told to go and have a look at TikTok because they wanted me to get a TikTok account, which I did, and they were like, just spend a while on the account getting used to it. And I thought to myself, it's not that Western civilization and culture is about to collapse; it's that it collapsed some time ago.
Hence TikTok.
Hence TikTok. Anyway, I mean, this is all ultimately the gripe of somebody who's too old to get it. But like, so it is interesting. There's a huge thing going on with, particularly the major labels are kind of obsessed with data and streaming and TikTok and all the rest of it. And it doesn't seem to me to translate into any meaningful either economic or artistic activity. There's a sort of break in the logical chain there somewhere.
Yes.
And I don't think that the current sort of data mania is a particularly sustainable business model. I don't know. In many ways, I don't really care. For I have a different approach that I'm interested and engaged in. But I don't know. I mean, the music industry has long been a backslapping, congratulatory, cutthroat, all the things that Hunter S. Thompson said about it and all the rest. And you have to slightly engage with that realistically. But it is what it is.
Well, speaking about what does matter, because we got to let you go soon. You, in 3 days' time, you're hitting Hamburg in Germany and Cologne. You're doing a few dates in Germany, and then you're back on home turf, 21st of September in Reading. You're playing all through the UK, right the way through till October, and then you're back into Germany in November. So you are playing everywhere, man. You're doing Reading, Sheffield, Oxford, London, Nottingham, Birmingham, Cambridge, Norwich, Leeds, Glasgow, everywhere. You're playing Cardiff on the 12th of October at the Tram Shed. So I'll be there for that one because that's my hometown.
Fantastic, please do.
I'll see you there.
And the Tram Shed is a great venue as well.
Awesome venue.
I have the fortune of having done what I do for long enough now that quite often I know the venues we're playing better than the local crew do because I've been playing them since they were in school, which is a lovely thing actually. And there's a lot of spots on this tour I'm really excited to get back to: Brixton Academy, Nottingham Rock City.
Oh, my favourite.
All that kind of thing.
Nottingham Rock City is my favourite venue in the UK to play.
It is the only venue that I have tattooed on my arm. So.
Oh, sweet! I love that. Yeah, man. Well, I've got a goldfish ball from Rock City over there, which I stole when I was there last.
Well, there you go. Amazing. Good work.
Before we wrap up, so what's next then? What's after that? What have you got coming up next? Anything else that we need to know about? Or I mean, is it enough already to have a #1 record and a massive tour?
I mean, I think that briefly, this record was an unusual one for me. It was sort of released at a point in time when touring was still up on bricks. Usually I tour through an album release. I'm starting to toy around with writing new stuff, but this record was very much written to be played live, and the record's been out for more than 6 months, and this is the first UK tour for it. That's mental to me. Yeah. So I guess my point is, my intention is to keep touring this record for a while yet, because I'm proud of it. I think it's a good record, and I want to keep trucking around the world. So there'll be that, but then there'll be more records. I also recently released a side project record called Eating Before Swimming, which is what to say about that? It's a kind of deranged postmodernist deconstructivist electronic metal record.
Wow, okay.
Was that the most pretentious thing anyone's ever said on here?
That sounds like all my records.
Well, there we go. So that's been out lately, which has been fun too. So just keep them busy, basically.
Amazing. Well, the brilliant FTHC is out now and is available everywhere. Go out and buy a copy, buy 10 copies and give them to your friends. And let me tell you that if the life-affirming extravaganza that is a Frank Turner live show comes even remotely near your town, go and grab a shitload of tickets and get out, because it is the best thing you will ever experience. Frank, thanks so much for stopping by to chat with us today. I wish you nothing but the best. Thanks for everything you give us, and long may you continue to shine.
Hey, thank you so much, man. It's very kind of you, and hopefully I'll see you in Cardiff.
I'll see you in Tramshed. Cheers, Frank.
See you later.
And just like that, he's gone. There we go. Frank Turner, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hear it for him. What do you think of that? I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. There was loads of things I would have asked more if we had more time. But I mean, I think we managed to pack quite a lot into, the 20 odd minutes that we had there. What a cool dude. I got a lot of time for Frank Turner, man. Not only do I genuinely believe he's one of the best songwriters of our times, but, what a super intelligent, articulate, and, grounded guy that he is. And also, he's bang on, he's on the right side of a lot of really important issues, and he's very outspoken and supportive of a lot of important causes. So, yeah, an all-around cool dude that deserves all of the success, the hard-won success that he's spent so long building. So big props to Frank Turner, and really appreciate him giving us his time today as well. I know he's super busy. Check out his website at frank-turner.com and go to the live page and check out where he's playing, because he's literally playing as of about 2 days from broadcasting this episode tonight. He'll be playing in Germany and all over the UK and then back to Germany, and doubtless there will be a ton more dates as well. So check him out. He's on tour right now. He's going to be coming to all the main spots around the UK. If you can get a ticket, I would not hang about, get them, because the live show is fantastic. The dude's got so many good songs, man. Classics, you know what I mean? And I think at this point with 9 albums, that every song that's squeezed into a set list is going to be an absolute banger. So get out there. I will be at the Cardiff show, which is on October the 12th at the Cardiff Tramshed. So I shall see you there. And if you haven't yet heard the new album FTHC, man, just go and listen to it. I'm gonna pick up a copy on vinyl, I think, because I want to have the real deal. It's an absolutely incredible album. So many great storytelling songs on there, and nice to hear a return to a heavier sound, which Frank does so well as well. So there's my plug. Got to keep the label happy. But, every damn word of it, I cannot get Haven't Been So Well out of my head. It's keeping me awake at night. And it's so many good tunes in that record. And his lyrics, man, his lyrics are second to none. When I listen to, a Frank Turner record, I always have this overwhelming feeling of, okay, this is what a real songwriter sounds like. It's just his storytelling and his wordplay and his lyricism. It's really second to none. So there we go. So I hope you enjoyed the chat. Maybe we'll get him on again for a longer chat when he's got a bit more time, if he ever gets more time. But, I thought that was interesting, and I hope you did too. If you're in London this coming Saturday the 10th, I will be performing in Hyde Park with those pesky kids at Extinction Rebellion. So come and say hello. I shall be there playing some tunes off the new record, Make Anger Great Again. And it'd be great to see you and have a little sing-along if you're in town. I think I'm on at about 3 o'clock. But, due to the nature of these kind of pop-up protest events, that could mean anything from 3 o'clock till 7 o'clock, you know what I mean? So, but come along anyway to Stand Up Be Counted, because it's a very important issue. As you know, Extinction Rebellion are people that I've been involved with on many events, and I am a strident supporter of them. So they're doing a festival of resistance. It's going all weekend. Please do come along and show some solidarity and Stand Up Be Counted and support the cause. Because as they say, there is no music on a dead planet. Climate change is real, it's happening, and it's urgent. As always, I'm going to finish up by nagging you again to subscribe to the podcast. There are some awesome episodes coming up. Truly incredible guests coming up. So hit that damn subscribe button and the follow button so that you get notified when these episodes drop. Because as I said in the intro, I did miss last week, and it's possible that I might be missing next week as well. So you can't rely at the moment on these dropping at 7 o'clock every Wednesday, because other things are going to take precedent. Because at the end of the day, I'm not just a podcaster. This is something I do on the side, as well as being, a professional musician myself. I'm supposed to be finishing my second book. I run a label. I go to the House of Lords. These are the sorts of things I do now. You know what I mean? So the podcasting is something that I love doing, and it's great for me to be able to share these really interesting conversations with really important dudes. But at the moment, I think, and for the future, obviously when I'm touring with a band and stuff, I'd like to keep doing these, but it is going to be pretty much impossible for me to keep these regularly coming out at 7 o'clock on a Wednesday. So I think if you want to know when these are dropping, if you're not following me on social media, then the best thing to do is to subscribe to the podcast so you get a notification bell when you log into your Apple, your Spotify, or your YouTube, or whatever. And on a week when I do miss one, please do go back through and listen to the previous episodes, because there have been so many great conversations I've had with so many great people who've been kind enough to give me their time. So if you've missed a few episodes, then do go back and check those out, because there's some great conversations there that I'm really proud to have been able to put out into the content space. As always, thanks for the support, thanks for listening, and I hope you're all well. Have an incredible week. Take care of yourself, take care of others, and go and check out FTHC, the new album by Frank Turner. It's a banger. Turn it up, and you can thank me later, and maybe I'll see you at one of the shows. Love you loads, guys. Have an awesome week. I'll speak to you soon. See ya.